Now, Rand Merchant Bank this week released a ranking of countries in Africa in terms of their attractiveness as investment destinations. So where is South Africa, you ask? It has fallen from second to third place. One of the authors of the Where to Invest in Africa 2020 report is RMB economist Neville Mandimika. He joins us now. Neville, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get to South Africa, let's bring up those rankings. We have a graph for you. Egypt's topping the log. What makes Egypt so attractive as an investment destination?
Well, if you look at their growth rates, I mean, this is an economy that's growing at plus 4%. And after the Arab Spring Revolution that we saw, there's been quite a significant increase in foreign direct investment. So that has really boosted their structural growth rates. And we're starting to see those benefits coming through. And also from a portfolio investment perspective, I mean, you were just talking about interest rates. Investors seem to be loving Egypt at this stage because you've got a fairly stable currency, you've got yields that are relatively attractive, and so you're seeing both corporates and institutional clients taking to Egypt, and hence they're sitting pretty at that number one spot.
And Egypt has gone through turmoil. I mean, we saw those elections bringing in a religious party, then the military getting involved again, then another election, Al-Sisi coming in, but it shows you things can turn around. And turn around
quickly. I mean, that's precisely what we're seeing.
Yeah,
I mean,
this has been quick.
It wasn't that far along. So, I mean, we're really seeing that, level of energy coming through into Egypt. And I think it's really testament to what we can do here if we get it right.
So Morocco has taken over us. What are they doing right?
Well, for similar reasons, right? Foreign direct investment, proximity to Europe, export-led economy, and also political stability. They didn't go through the Arab Spring Revolution, so they had that momentum behind them. Hence, they're starting to see the fruit of that efforts of them actually sitting at number 2 in our rankings.
We have dropped to 3. Is it all the same reasons that we're always talking about? Growth, structural reforms. You were saying Egypt has turned around quickly. It feels a lot like we as South Africa are talking about economic reforms when some other African countries are
actually doing it. Yes, I think that's certainly what we're seeing there. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing here is structural slowdown, a bit of own goals that we're scoring. But I think really if we get that growth rate, starting to push up past that 2%, then we start to be competitive. Because I think it's important to remember that we're competing for the same dollar that Egypt is trying to get or Morocco is trying to get. So the sooner we get our house in order, I think the better we are in terms of moving up those rankings.
Are we still on the rankings because historically we're so big and dominant, or are there still things going right? Positivity, you talk about financial markets, deep financial markets, financial inclusion in South Africa. What are the good things happening?
Well, I think that's what's carrying us, right? I mean, the sheer size of this economy is massive. I mean, when you look at other economies across the spectrum, and our financial markets are fairly deep and liquid. So, whatever happens in the US, we see that happening, affecting South Africa almost immediately. So I think that relative liquidity that we offer investors is really carrying us through. But again, the slide that we've seen, according to our rankings over the last couple of years, moving from that number 1 spot, sitting at number 3, I think it really speaks to some of the structural challenges that we're facing here.
And could we slip further?
It is possible. I mean, it really depends on how quickly we actually get our house in order. I mean, SOE issues, political stability and all of those things. And if we do get that $100 billion investment drive that the president, with the conference that we had a few months ago, I think that would really ramp up our structural growth and boost us out of this inertia that we're in.
A few years ago, we were talking a lot about being the gateway to Africa. We wanted companies to come and put their head offices in South Africa and then branch out. Competition from Mauritius. I mean, did that strategy ever work? Are we being seen as the landing place, or could we be seen as that?
Well, I think that strategy for some time it worked, but we're starting to see other hotspots or centers of excellence around Africa starting to compete. I mean, we're looking at Kenya, the so-called Silicon Valley of Africa. We're looking at Morocco. We're looking at Egypt. As places where investors are saying, well, maybe I don't have to go through South Africa first. So again, we're competing for that same level of dollar that other economies are competing for. So we've really got to get our economy on track.
And are there other attractive bases, other attractive gateways?
Well, by sheer size, I think we're still head and shoulders above a lot of the economies. But I think from a trajectory perspective, Kenya, Morocco, Egypt are still very much attractive. And also Ghana. I mean, these are economies that are growing at, 2-3 times more than what we are here.
So let's talk about Kenya, because they've got a growth rate, expected growth rate of 5%, when we can barely eke out 1%. So we are being threatened from the bottom, and Rwanda just below that as well, East Africa.
And I think what really excites me about Kenya and East Africa in general is that it's not growth that is coming through from one sector, right? It's broad-based. So if you look at construction, if you look at ICT, if you look at agriculture, all of these are contributing in equal measures to actually that, 5-6% growth rates that we're seeing. And that is average, when you consider the spectrum. We've got Ethiopia, Ivory Coast, Senegal that are growing at 7-8%. So, the list is quite high up there in terms of what we should be doing from a growth perspective.
What more is East Africa doing that we can learn from? Because we hear about their sort of economic bloc integrating more and more, and that's what we all want: intra-African trade, integration, movement of peoples. Is that giving them a real advantage?
Certainly. I mean, if we see some of the pronouncements that have happened over the last few months in terms of ease of travel, within the East Africa bloc, I think that is really ushered in the momentum in terms of people being able to move from Uganda to Kenya. So I think it really opens up the competitive space in terms of Kenya being able to focus on one or two things that they're doing right. And I think that is really boosting their momentum.
And we're doing the opposite.
Unfortunately. I think we could be doing better.
Overall, is Africa as a whole a good investment prospect? Is the rest of the world still interested, basically?
I would say yes. I think the Africa Rising narrative, I think, is certainly there. But the message that we're really taking to investors at this stage is that you have to be really discerning in terms of where you park your cash. So even though we're talking about the good news stories across Africa, there's still some economies that are lagging behind in terms of their own structural reform. So it's not, just painting Africa with one brush and, just finding some country within 54 that you can put your money in, but to be really selective in terms of where the growth prospects are.
And let's make South Africa more attractive while we're at it. Thank you very much. That was RMB economist Neville Mandimika. And that was The Bottom Line. Thank you for being with us. Full View continues after a short break.